And it's exploring the root causes of staff shortages within ground handling. I'm going to introduce the moderator for the team, and we'll look at actually what are the actual problems in ground handling staff shortages. I'd like to introduce Mr. Fabio Gamba, Director General of the Airport Services Association and Airline Catering Association, and he'll come up and introduce the group and lead and moderate the group. Fabio, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, Paris. We've been assigned a very important mission this morning, which is to simply fix the staff shortage that we're all feeling the brunt of. So it's an important panel, and it's really my pleasure to introduce you to a number of distinguished panelists. First of which I would like to welcome Patricia Cortada Fontova. She is the head of ground operations and cargo at IAG Airports. Please, Patricia. Coming right next is Thomas Romig. Thomas is known to you. He's already been speaking throughout the day, yesterday and today. He is VP of Safety and Operations in ACR World. Next is David Barker, Divisional Senior Vice President of Airport Operations in Benata. Welcome, David. And then we have another David Anderson, Global Head of QHSE in Swissports. Welcome, David. So everyone has found a seat. Excellent. We're going to try and keep some questions at the very end session of this, but perhaps to start with, staff shortage is something that we've been discussing throughout yesterday and today, and actually we started even before then on Monday at the internal IATA sessions. It is obviously something that is on the minds of everyone. We've seen a number of reports on the news that a number of airports were having long queues, unexpected long queues, and with disrupted passengers, and so on and so forth. And we're all now looking at what summer is going to bring to the operations with some angst, I must say. So as I said, we've been assigned this very important task of fixing this. The five of us, or the four of you, I would say. So let's look quickly at first the reality check. How are you impacted in your day-to-day business? And I know it's never nice to look at the problems you have, but I think it's important for us to realize that this is really only European, North American, or really worldwide. So perhaps we can start with you, Patricia.
Sure. So thanks for the introduction. I think it's a reality that we're all living now from airlines' perspective, and my personal opinion is that in terms of the shortages that we're experiencing now, COVID has only been a catalyst of that the root cause came before the COVID, and that only helped to speed up things. So airlines now we've suffered a lot. We have a summer next, we're just starting with a good recovery of passengers, and what's going on is not helping. The news started being only in the sector at the beginning. Now the news are all over with the airports issues and the long queues that the images are quite impacting everyone. You might agree on that, and that's not helping the sector in general. Airlines are at the very bottom, and when you look at the return of investment capital, for the last 20 decades we've been there, and we are feeding all the value chain in aviation. So it's important that we really consider how to solve this thing, go to the root cause, don't think only on the short term, and have a long-term perspective and long-term solutions for that.
Thank you. How about you, Thomas? About what's the situation like in, because you have a worldwide view, right? So
Absolutely.
what's the situation like in the global airports situation?
Yeah. So looking at it from a global perspective, it's and it's been said a few times in this conference, the challenge that we have with workforce is to a certain extent located today in the European region, the North American region. Australia, we've got some feedback from our members there saying that there are some challenges in recruitment. And actually, I had a discussion earlier, well, I guess it was a couple of days ago, with somebody from the Singapore airport who was saying that there's also some challenges. So it's a little bit, I guess, spreading into the Asia-Pacific region. The challenge that we have is across the board. It's not just ground handling staff. It's not just security personnel. It's also looking at all of the retail, food and beverage, and operations staff within airports, and that's one of the big problems that we have is really this sort of global challenge, or across all different airports. The reason I have my tablet here is because I have a little bit of data which we've picked up from a survey we conducted. Now this is European data from a survey conducted by the ACI Europe team, who are looking at the risk or the expected challenges from an airport's perspective for this summer. So 66% of the respondents to the survey, and it was a very broad range of airports that provided responses, say that they expect to see significant flight delays to increase during this summer in preparation for the summertime. And of course, a significant portion of this is due to the staff problem, due to the staff shortage problem, but also due to the shifting patterns that we've seen in terms of planning for flights, the shifting traffic schedules and the peaks, which have actually become more peaky, if we can say it like that. There's 16% of the same respondents expect to have a significant number of cancellations, and 15% then expect to have flight schedules to be adapted, or would like to see the flight schedules to be adapted to be able to mitigate some of these risks. And then in the end, 35% of the respondents expect that airports and ground handling staff will significantly affect their operations, not just for the summer, but beyond. And so that goes to what you were saying. It's a longer term issue which we need to be addressing. So I guess in a nutshell, if we look at it, it's going to be a complicated summer. Travel this summer, of course, it's going to be complicated, but it's also going to continue to be complicated as we go forward. Put this down now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was the airport's perspective. I understand they are obviously related to what the airlines think and how they feel. From a ground handling perspective, we have two Davids, so I'm going to look at you and say, David, from Denata. How about the ground handling perspective from your side?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I do think you actually hit the nail on the head. What we're seeing is in markets like the Americas, specifically North America, Australia and Europe, immense staff shortages. And we're talking about the summer. If you haven't hired yet, you're already done, because you're 6 weeks out from getting a badge, and you're 6 weeks out from training. So if we're talking, June 1st, summer's over for you for labor. I'm sorry, if you haven't hired yet, you're out of luck. That's just a fact. And what we have seen through the pandemic, and I think what everybody expected pre-pandemic was it to be an employer's market, that the wages would actually drop. The exact opposites happened. Now we're seeing wage inflation in the UK as high as 20%. We're seeing in the US as high as 50% in certain markets. And the fact is, and we're actually seeing it with the airports too. Just recently Amsterdam posted they're going to increase their landing fees and rates by, I think, 30%. Boston raised theirs by double. And the fact is we're in a different environment. It's not just the ground handlers that are short-staffed, it's the airports. The reason why badging time is taking so long is because the airports cannot handle the uptick of aviation. And it's actually coming back faster. Badging offices are actually closing due to capacity. So for me, labor shortage, it's a bigger issue. We commoditize ground handling in these major countries such as USA, such as Europe, and Australia, to the point where it became a lower wage job than Starbucks. And really, are we really want to create the next level of aviation professionals on less than Starbucks? I mean, I think we need, I appreciate that. The fact is aviation's been a beautiful career for me. I have 3 lovely daughters that are able to go to college and pay for college because aviation has been a profession. Through pre-pandemic, we made it a commodity in these markets. So guess what? Surprise, surprise, nobody wants to work in aviation anymore. It's a fact. If you had a child today and you were raising them and they were 19 years old, would you choose aviation for their profession today? Really, show of hands, how many people would say, hey, my child, come work the ramp today or be a passenger service agent today? That's my point. There's a few hands. The fact is, we, as a collective aviation family, have to realize we are professionals, and we need the next level of aviation to be professionals too, which means we need professional wages and professional markets to handle multi-million dollars equipment and actually bring the highest, safest standard and operational performance back to aviation. So I challenge the airlines, the ground handlers in the airports, raise the bar, raise the safety bar, raise the sustainability bar, raise the diversity bar, but let's be professionals. Let's stop being a commodity.
Thank you. Thank you, David. David, you're next.
David, I don't know how I follow that. Because I think you're absolutely right on the points you raised. Going back to the question I think you asked me around what is the reality check. I think Warwick sat here earlier. From a Swissport perspective, we are looking to grow. We're looking to grow the business. The good business is coming back very, very quickly. We're trying to get 17,000 people into our business. As you say, Dave, there is definitely a lag between the interview, getting people through the door, training them, getting their badges. And you're right, we've got to be pre-planning. And we're kind of out of sync at the moment, I think, with some of our customers, and I think we all understand why airlines are chopping and changing their schedules at short notice. The governments haven't made life easy over the last 2 years, with a myriad of different rules. But I think the consequence of that is our customers are having to move their schedules around, which means that we've then got to change our models and back to the resourcing and making sure we've got the allocation right. And that takes time, because at the end of the day, it's human beings who have got a life. They all work for us. They're all our colleagues who work for us, but they've also got to have a roster that works for them. So I'm confident we'll get through this. And I think Willie said it yesterday. This is an opportunity as much as anything else. We will get through this, but I think it will be a bit of a bumpy summer.
Yeah. Prospects in the relatively short term are going to be complicated. I think we all agree on that. Now, thank you for the reality check. I'd like to briefly go on what you think are the causes of this, because the job is still pretty much the same. That might be a reason why we're having now so many difficulties in hiring people after the pandemic. But I'd like to have your personal experience on the whys, and then perhaps more importantly, as a third thing, I'd like to go on the solutions. But first things first, why do you think it is so difficult now to have some people and to retain them?
If I can start with an answer, a small part, because I think there are many things. But one thing you've already mentioned is because the work is the same and the people are not the same. We need to acknowledge that the new generations are very different from ourselves and from older generations. And the first step is to understand them, right? Maybe the job cannot fit all of their requirements, but we can transform somehow the jobs and help them. And I think that technology plays here a role, but we will speak about solutions maybe later. But one cause for me is first understanding the people that we want to attract and how we want to retain them, because there are two things, attraction and retention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thomas.
I think if I can build on that, there is indeed, this whole discussion that we've been having for a couple of years of saying let's build back better, and we heard a lot of people saying let's build back better, let's do things differently. Personally, I don't think we've done all that much differently. I think we've talked about it a lot, and we haven't actually made that much action. And that's today is where, coming back to your reality check, that's the reality. We need to be going beyond that. We need to, move into a different way of doing things and think about doing things and then actually action them and not just talk about them. And this is the challenge that we're now faced with as an industry, is how do we actually go beyond talking about it and saying, well, we're going to do things differently and move into doing things differently. One of the things that we've talked about a few times over the last couple of days is sustainability as a whole. And we've talked yesterday a lot about the greenification of ground services. In the ground ops meeting that we had on Monday, we talked about the economic sustainability of the aviation system. And if you think about one of the challenges which you alluded to also is, commodities market and staff being somewhat low paid. The whole system, to a certain extent, has that economic challenge that we need to face. And so it goes from how much we as passengers pay to, it goes to how much the airlines are earning, it goes to the margins that we have, it goes to what we charge as airports. The whole economics of the aviation system, to a certain extent, will probably need to be at some point also re-engineered, rethought, to be able to make sure that we can sustain what we're trying to do as an aviation system. There were some presentations yesterday talking about growth figures up into 2040 and beyond, where we would see doubling of the traffic that we had previously. I don't believe today that the system that we have with the people and the technology we have today will be able to accommodate that going into the future. And that's where we need the change to happen. Now, I don't have the solutions, unfortunately, right here, but at least we, I think, are collectively coming with a conscience to be able to start making those changes.
Well, thank you. So we're going to go to the solutions if we have a number of them, and I'm sure collectively.
Got a couple up my sleeve, but.
But David, what's your intake with respect to the why it is happening? David,
yeah, okay, so I'll make sure it's me. Well, I think it's two approaches. I think one is we have a short-term, very tactical problem we have to solve, which is wages in the market and recruiting the new generation of staff that need. And then we have a long-term issue, which is how do we actually evolve ground handling and cargo space to actually, we actually start innovating and using things such as remote control pushbacks, and we actually start using drone technology more. And we actually, to be honest, we're missing, we signed up for the 25 by 25 because the reality is we're missing really 50% of our workforce because females aren't on the ramp. We see them in packs, we see them in cabin cleaning, but we have a mission that we actually should make the job palatable for another part of our population. And then long term, we need to continue to look at that innovation. So we're no longer hiring a baggage agent. We're hiring a technology person to actually do automation of a baggage system. And that evolution needs to happen in aviation. I actually cringe. I think it was said yesterday, and it's still 1970s on the ramp. I kind of disagree. I disagree is we have APD now. We're doing mototalks with remote control pushbacks. We have the ability to do autonomous vehicle trials. We're using them in Cincinnati and doing them in Los Angeles. How better to recruit the next generation of aviation professionals into technology around autonomous vehicles? We need to stop thinking about the solution being a sustainability. It's actually the solution to our problem because it actually eliminates the labor issue around manual labor and brings us into the new generation of technology. So there are things that are out there that are happening that we need to do. Even I think Willie Walsh said yesterday, why are we still have jet bridge operators? Why does it exist still? And why aren't we actually hiring people to actually program jet bridges to actually go on standardized aircraft? And by the way, how hard would that be to recruit? That's going to be a so much better equation to hire an aviation professional that's in technology than say, hey, go throw a bag for us. And so for me, it's two-pronged. One is we have an immediate hump over the next 90 days we have to find. And that immediate hump, in my lifetime, I've been in aviation since 1987. I've never seen wages go backwards because I keep hearing this comment, well, let's just do something temporarily and then when it comes September, we'll look at it again. That's not a solution because the reality is we have to get the wages up to make it sustainable short term, and then we got to change our market to actually make it attractive for the next generation. Virtual reality training, diversity, sustainability, technology. This is the way to our future. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Dave, you're taking all the answers.
Oh, sorry.
No, but you're absolutely right. Not answering your question directly, so I do apologise. But you're absolutely right. If we are going to grow our business, I've had the joys of being on the stage before, and I think I've used the analogy. Heathrow was talking about a third runway. Now, it may or may not ever happen. But if Heathrow employs 100,000 people, say, a third runway, so with two runways, so a third runway would, in theory, add another 50,000 jobs. There's just not people to do that. So we've got to change the way that we do business. If at the moment, I think our labour shortages have the ability to constrain our ability to grow. So you're absolutely right. I think we've got to get into technology. We've got to start finding solutions that allow us to do more work with the same people, because that's probably the starting point. And a lot of those technological solutions do exist today. And then we go on to move to a role where we have people who are not manually handling bags, because that is 1970s work. it's completely wrong. We've got people in the holes of 737s moving bags. We wouldn't do it in any other industry.
Okay.
Yet we do it in aviation. So we've got to rethink how we address our business.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear to everyone now. I want to do the reverse. I'd like to start with you, David, on the next point, which is really, acknowledging all this. And I think there's no real discussion about, the reality and the perhaps the underlying roots of why this is happening now. How do we address this? And I'd like you, when you make an answer, make a qualified answer, having in mind a number of things. The first one being perhaps in an important way the contractual working relationship, the triangular one, but perhaps even more importantly, the one that airlines have with the ground handlers. That's one thing that I'd like you to address. I'd like as well you to think of the conflicting messages that we're sending to the potential workers in terms of automation. We're saying we're a labor-intensive industry, and at the same time we're saying tomorrow is going to be automated. So if I'm vaguely interested in getting a career, pick up a career in this sector, but then I'm hearing constantly that I'm going to be replaced by a robot sometime. What's in it for me? And then eventually, I'd like also you to qualify your answer with having in mind competition. How does competition affect this? Is it race to the bottom? Is this race to the bottom the cause of this shortage of skills? And can we turn this in another way, still by keeping, obviously, a healthy competition? So I know it's a complicated question, but perhaps, David, if you could give it a go.
I'll do my best and try and cover off all those points. So starting with the last one first. I mean, the reality is, if there's a race to the bottom, it's our fault. Everybody in this room, us here, we are doing that if there's a race to the bottom. So the ones that can fix it are us. We're the ones that can fix that. I would say, nobody is forced to sign a loss-making contract. That's the reality. We can all turn a contract down. And I think we've got to be smart in the way that we do our business. That said, if we've got contracts that are sitting there for 12 months or a season, or they don't help for investment. A long-term contract and a long-term partnership with a customer is a much better and more sustainable model. And I think when you start looking at things such as some of the licenses that are applied, how do we get that sustainability? So there are things that we can do as an industry to address that, and it takes airlines, ground handlers, regulators to start addressing it. But I say if the race to the bottom can be fixed by us, because we are the industry. I'm trying to think back to all the rest of your points, because there was a lot of questions in there.
Automation and contractor relationship.
Yeah, and I think you talked about the from an automation point of view, how will youngsters, Generation Z, look at it if they think, well, actually, we are going to move to a world where we don't want people. Now, I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we don't want people. We will always be a business that requires people. I would like to think our jobs develop into better jobs that offer our people a career path. We don't. And if somebody wants to come and move bags for 50 years, that's absolutely fine. That is absolutely fine, and we should support them. But equally, if we've got people who want a career, we should equally be capable of providing them with that career structure. And I don't think we've been that good at it in the past. I think we've seen labour as a commodity rather than our teams and our colleagues as actually the source of allowing us to develop our businesses. But that's changing. I think if COVID has done anything to us, I think it's allowed us to look at our resource pools differently. And I think a number of the speakers over the last day and a half have said very, very similar things. Again, for me, I mean, I am absolutely 100% sold on automation. I think automation is the solution because I think it allows us to grow. You know, and the technology is out there, and we will hear people talk on here about all the good things that are being done. We've just got, again, I think it was said this morning, we've just got to make sure we get all the parties who are involved in that investment decision pointing in the same direction. Because at the moment, we might have ground handlers and airlines saying it's a great idea to have an automated jetty, but if the airport authority are not prepared to invest, it doesn't get off the ground. You know, likewise with some of the IGHC, if we're not prepared to invest, then and that gets back into length of contracts and licenses, because you're not going to invest a lot of money in new GSE if you've only got a 2-year license or a 2-year contract somewhere.
Thank you. Well,
I don't think I answered all your points, but
it's fine. I know it's a fairly complex thing, and I think you've addressed a lot of it. And obviously, we've heard your CEO this morning talk about this as well. Obviously, no surprise, you're in line with what he's saying. But I like to perhaps insist a little bit more on this automation thing, which to me really sends a conflicting image. We all are in agreement that automation is tomorrow's, response to this. At the same time, personally, when I'm going to the bank and I'm comparing the 1980s, you had to go to the cashier to withdraw some money, and now you have these machines, and that's also all good, and that's much easier to do this. But at the same time, you have no human interface anymore, and sometimes it can be extremely frustrating, and things don't work better than they are, and I'm not sure that bank employees are happier today than they used to be in the 1980s, if I can, just use this image. So David, to you, what's your take on automation in particular, but also I'd like to have your say on competition.
Well, I'll start with competition, because and then I'll come to automation. And this is probably the controversial statement. I'm kind of known for this. There's too much competition in these markets. Plain and simple. When you have 20 ground handlers in Chicago, it's too many. Yeah. I mean, the fact is, if you want investment and you want sustainability, the airlines say, and I won't name the group, but they get so unhappy with the pricing, they brought a whole new ground handler into the market to add the 21st ground handler. And then they say, why are wages so low? And for me, I'm all for competition in reality, but let's compete on terminals. Let's, us and Swissport, go compete for Chicago's Terminal 5, and let that be the competition, and then raise the bar. Say, in Terminal 5, I want EGSE. I want to make sure you hit the diversity targets. I want innovation in that terminal. And by the way, then compete Chicago Terminal 5 against LAX Tom Bradley, or compete it against Amsterdam. That's how you get investment back into the business. This is how you make it sustainable. This is how you get the maximum synergies. You put one set of equipment at each gate, one crew to seize each gate, and then your labor is actually staffed per terminal. So competition isn't a bad thing, but it's a bad thing when you have 20 ground handlers at one terminal, moving equipment all over the place in the lowest wage. So rethink competition. It's okay to compete at airports. It's okay to compete within the airport at terminals, but think bigger. Think about the synergies in the aviation community. And you said it best, the race to the bottom, raise our hands. All the ground handlers and the airlines, we're all at fault. Because guess what? As soon as an RFP comes out, we're willing to bare our souls to try to win the contract. We got to change our mentality. Let's embrace competition, but let's embrace it on a bigger scale. Let's stop thinking about the singular flight or just the one flight. Let's think about the terminals and the operation. That is the way we win together, and that's how we get investment back into business with 5- and 7-year contracts. This is how sustainability happens. This is how you actually make sure you hit diversity targets. This is the key to the future. It allows investment. Innovation. There's always been a career path in aviation. You start as a ramp agent, you become a lead, you're a good lead, you become a good supervisor. But guess what? You also have to put leadership training in. You have to make sure they have soft skill trainings. You got to make sure they're qualified. And then all of a sudden they move to station manager. You got to give them finance training. You got to give them human resource training. You can't say things you can say on the ramp. You got to start investing in the people. Innovation is no different. So when innovation starts to occur, you're going to take an agent that does a lower level task, and we have an obligation as aviation professionals to invest in those people, to make aviation a career again. I'm not scared of innovation. I embrace it. Because if I do my job as an aviation leader, I will invest in that person to grow his career and learn new skill sets to make him a better individual to provide for him and his family. It's our obligation as an aviation family to do that. It's not a competition equation. It's an aviation career path equation.
Great, thank you. Clear. Thomas.
It's an interesting one. I'm not sure. Yep, there we go. Competition's an interesting one, and as an airport, we like to see a certain amount of competition, but we don't want to see the type of competition you were just talking about, 20 ground handlers in a single airport. That creates a lot of complexity from an operational perspective, from simply the use of space or the needed space that you need for all that equipment and so on. And I like where you're going in terms of pooling and having standardized equipment on stands and so on. That's the type of direction we need to be going. And then competing possibly in terms of the quality or in terms of services which are provided within terminals, within the, let's say, the overwing rather than the underwing. And so I think there's an interesting thing there. There is another aspect to competition which we're seeing in the workforce space right now, which is competition with other industries. And I was talking to some colleagues in Cincinnati Airport recently who just developed, well, they didn't develop, but on their airport there's a huge Amazon warehouse which has been developed. And they were seeing direct competition from Amazon, who were picking up their staff, not literally, but picking up their staff, the ground handling staff, and even some of the other concessionaires within the terminal, to go work in the Amazon warehouse, paying them $5 an hour more than what they were getting out on the ramp. And that's another challenge that we have in terms of competition, but maybe for a slightly different context. In terms of automation, there's a lot which can be done. There's a lot which already is being done. But it's definitely one of the ways that we need to be moving within the industry. We're right now, ACI has put together a task force looking at the workforce challenge across all regions of the world, across all of our member airports. We've got 2,000 airports around the world who are members of our association. And what we're seeing is one of the ways to address the challenge with more innovation coming in, with more automation, with, let's say, the changes in technology coming into the airport space, with the aviation ecosystem, is actually looking at the upskilling which will be needed and having that as part of the career path which we're providing to personnel coming into the industry. And showing, we've heard it already in the discussions here, showing that there is a career path which actually allows us to progress, which allows somebody to come in an entry-level job and moving up and being able to be trained, skilled, upskilled into those, let's say, management functions where you're managing systems rather than doing that heavy lifting type of activity which we see traditionally. And that's really one of the progressions which hopefully will also help in terms of attracting younger generations or the next level of professionals into the industry, is providing that visibility of working with technology rather than competing with technology. Of course, technology sometimes works well. In other cases, it doesn't work. As a personal experience, flying out here in Montreal, all of the automatic bag drop systems were out of service, so we ended up going to the check-in desk and dropping bags at the check-in desk, and that's the way it is. So then you have that human interaction, which is nice to have in certain circumstances too, although it just creates a longer line, but that's a different problem. So sure. Automation is definitely the way forwards, and we need to be showing those transitions and new skills which will be available for personnel joining your industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Patricia, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, even though still related to the solutions. I mentioned in the intro that I like as well to perhaps look into the working relationship that you have between an airline and a ground handler. Do you think that the ever-growing pressure that airlines are putting on the system, and in particular on the ground handlers, might be a cause of this, a stress, obviously, and of this difficulty for ground handlers to hire? And if that is the case, how do you see a possible solution out of this?
It's a good question. So I think that coming back to the point of the contract part, I think is where you formalize an agreement between the handler and the airline. How I see the contracts since a few years ago and going forwards is a partnership, a true partnership. The contract has to be a win-to-win space. And by, I think, David started, a longer term contract may enable doing some changes. I'm a big supporter of that. And honestly, through my latest years, I've done a change with how we issue the tenders and so on, and we're really offering these long-term contracts because what I think is that the contract is an enable. It helps you to go through this process. So we're speaking a lot about automation. Automation requires investment. So if you are the handling company and if you are the airline, you need to understand the company and how it works, right? If you need to put some money and do some investments in technology, you need to do a business plan and make that work, right? For that, you need that long term. Also, what I think is that the contracts have no longer have to be something very fixed. I think they need to enable some space to be more competitive together. This is how I see that. For example, the continuous improvement and technology. So if through doing these investments, I'm able to reduce the number of employees, make them more efficient, I think the airline needs to see that, have that visibility, help you, and goes toward having a more lean cost, more effective operation. But again, I think a long-term contract can be something that helps both parties to go towards that direction. And if I can answer the question on automation and the threat, because I found this very interesting, I don't think it's a threat at all. I think younger generations want to work with technology. And what they see in this sector is a lack of both technology and sustainability. I think that those pillars, those two pillars, are very important for youngers. And I don't think that the progression path or the career is something very important for them, because how I see the next generation is immediateness. They want everything now, very, very different from having a long-term view of a career path. And the positions that we now have in the airport maybe will be very different in a few years, and we need to be very futuristic on that.
Great. All right. I think we have 3 minutes and plus a few seconds. I'd like to ask the floor if the floor has any questions that they would like to, burning question that would like to ask our distinguished panelists. I think it's now or never. Are there any questions? Yes, I can see a hand raised there. Would you please stand up and name yourself?
Yes, first of all, very good afternoon. I had one question written out. With staff shortages comes higher safety risks due to fatigue at the airports and with ground handling staff. What is, according to you guys, the best way to deal with these risks?
Who would like to take that?
Shall I go first? I think that's a great question. I think we've heard a couple of speakers today actually talk about some of the work that is being done. So I think Warwick talked about the peaks that we've seen from a Swissport perspective and trying to work with our customers to minimise those peaks. We need to be mindful that we cannot expect, because some countries we've got working time regulations, so the amount of hours people can work is quite well controlled. Other countries we don't, and when we don't have those regulations, I think it's incumbent on all of us as employers to make sure we understand how hard our people are working and when fatigue is an issue. We monitor it very closely, as I'm sure all organisations do. The converse of that, of course, is we are in a business where customers want to travel, and they don't want to travel at 2 o'clock in the morning. They want to travel probably midday, and everybody, you see that at airports. You see these peaks of the first wave, the second wave of traffic, and I think we've got to make sure we are flexible enough in the contracts that we offer, and whether that's people working 4-hour shifts, if that suits for people who have got young families, or so we've got a number of different tools. But from a directly for your fatigue piece, I say it's about working with our customers to try to take some of these risks out, so that we have customers who've got an on-schedule operation, So we haven't got people having to stay on at the end of a shift to cover a late arriving aircraft, and we work to try to take some of the obvious peaks out.
Yes, and maybe it's good as well to like offer some short 5 minutes breaks for employees to get like back on track and with something to drink. I think that's a really important and sometimes underlighted side of the ground handling. Thank you.
If I just add a little bit to that, I think you have to rely on your training programs. And what I mean by that is even though you have new hires, we know what it takes to hire. We have global ground operations manual. We have training programs. And I think it's more reliant than ever to make sure our on-the-job mentors are out there on the job every day shadowing the new hires. And so for me, it's a very tactical equation, is making sure that they actually have a clear path from hiring to classroom training to on-the-job training to final job sign-off. But this is where, as an industry, we should have robust training programs that enable this. Now, the key is, and to your point, is that focus on safety. And my larger concern is really not around the staff shortages. It's actually the amount of immense pressure on the people that have stayed behind. What I mean by that, there's been people throughout aviation that stayed throughout the pandemic that are working every day, and they're working short-staffed, short-handed, and no offense to the airlines, but an immense amount of pressure right now. It's on the news nightly. There was a news in Manchester that a pilot called for the police officers to come open the airplane because there's no ground crew. I mean, and so just think of the ground crew there. The reason that's happening isn't because there were staff shortages. It's because the staff that got tired and fed up on the ground because they were getting yelled at every single day from somebody with so much pressure. And we're starting to see this, especially in our major markets of UK and USA, where the people that have been historically aviation professionals are saying enough. To your point, stop adding on the peak, stop adding the pressure on top of it, because the experienced staff we do have are actually peaked out as well. So I do ask somebody, let's take a moment and thank an aviation worker when they're out there, because they're actually sticking it out and trying their best every single day. And trust me, they don't want to be short-staffed either. The lines are long for, JFK, there's a line of 5 weeks to get a badge now. So, they're wanting the help too. They want to go home. They've had enough of the overtime. They've had enough of the shift. They've had enough of the pressure. So again, when I go through the airport, all I can do, even when I see the big long line and the big thing, is say, man, thank you for being here today. Even if it's Swissport or Donata or Menzies, thank you for being there today, because it's been a tough challenge. And I want to close on the one remark is, I think as a group in an industry, let's make aviation a profession again. Let's bring it back. Let's make it something we go home and proud of. Let's go to the ramp, and when you smell jet fuel, it's like coffee in the morning. Let's reinvigorate ourselves. Let's stop the nonsense of being McDonald's. We're not McDonald's. We're better than this. We are better than this.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, everyone. I think our time is up. I'd like to really thank you all for this very insightful conversation. Please, a round of applause to our speakers. And I'd like to applaud Monica for having received the award of the Woman of the Year. Congratulations. Thank you very much.